This is the plaintiff, David Chaikin. He says he hired the defendant to be his property manager for an out-of-town two-family house he rented out, and the woman did basically nothing. She was supposed to collect the rent, pay the bills, and things like that. He comes to discover the water bill hasn't been paid in 2 years, and there's a problem with the rent collection. He's out all sorts of money because of the ineptitude of the defendant and is suing for the $5,000 he's owed. This is the defendant, Karen Craig. She says the things she's being sued for are things that happened after she no longer worked for the plaintiff. He was simply too much of a micromanager and they parted ways because it was a waste of her time. Bottom line, she owes him nothing and will prove it today. She's accused of doing nothing.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
And welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket, the plaintiff hired the defendant to manage his property, but to say he was inept is the grossest of misunderstatements. But the defendant says all of the problems he claims were not on her watch. It's the case of, yeah, I manage.
David Chaikin and Corinne Chaikin-Carey, you're representing both yourself and, is that your wife?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You are suing Karen Craig and Forever Buffalo Property Management. And this is who?
This is Wendy Nostro, the accountant.
Okay,
for the
is that
company.
also your daughter?
Yes.
Okay. For $5,000 in damages that you say you have sustained and loss of rent, apartment damages, and penalties with the water department as a result of Ms. Craig managing your property in Buffalo. Talk to me. Tell me what happened.
All right. In December 2008, we bought, my wife and I bought a small two-rental property in Buffalo and immediately contracted with Forever Buffalo to manage the property.
Okay, go on.
From the time of purchase, they were to transfer all of the utilities into their name as a proxy for me and handle all of the billing.
It's in their name?
Right.
The utilities would be, is that customary?
Actually, no. All the utility, not the utility companies, but like the sewer, the water, county tax, city tax, they would have gotten notification on where to send the bills.
Well, where to send the bill is one thing. Putting stuff in your name is another. Would you put stuff in your name?
No, David in care of
you.
Buffalo.
Okay,
yes.
is that what you understood?
All of the billing that were previously going to the previous owner would be transferred into their name.
The address would be their address.
It would be their address,
in whose
their
name
PO
were the
box.
bills supposed to be?
Eventually, things like electricity would be billed directly to the tenant.
But if not the tenant, then whom?
Then myself. I'm ultimately responsible
all right,
for the
we're
bills.
on the same page. So you understand the bills are all in your name.
Of course.
Just the question is they're all going to them for payment because they're doing both your accounts receivables by collecting rent and your accounts payables by paying all of whatever bills need paid.
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In July 2010, I got 2 notices from Forever Buffalo. The first notice was that the upper tenant's rent would be paid by one of the local social services agencies, and that I would receive a check within 60 days. The second notice was that they were terminating our contract.
Okay, hold on one second. They told you for the first time that they had rented it out to a party that didn't have the funds to pay?
The tenant was
on social services.
No,
so
the tenant was given a lease in January of that year.
By whom?
By Forever Buffalo. They
but
handled
with
all
your
the
approval?
leasing. Of course.
Oh, okay. So you knew
they
that
handle all
people
the
were
leasing of the
waiting for
apartment.
some government agency to kick in.
As of July, I was notified that some social service agency would be paying this rent and that I would get the rent within 60 days.
Okay, but in January, February, March, April, May, June, July...
They were current.
They were current and they were paying out of their own pocket?
Yes.
Okay, so the first you ever heard that a social services agency was going to come into play was in July?
That is correct.
And had you approved it?
Yes.
All right. So you got a notice from them saying it'll be 60 days before what you approved kicks in, and then you got a notice from them saying we don't want to do business with you anymore.
That is correct.
All right. And did you know why?
We had some run-ins with the lower tenant in the previous fall in August of 2009. The lower tenant was late in their rent, and they recommended that we evict the tenant. We agreed. But what happens is when a tenant gets an eviction letter, they can go down to the city, an emergency window, and this is a great mechanism for people so they don't get thrown out in the street, that they can get an emergency check cut for their arrears and stay in their apartment, which I'm all fine with. But the problem is we're out of pocket.
That's an answer to the question I asked, because what I asked you was why did they no longer want to do business with you?
Because this issue came up again in June right before they terminated our contract, it came up again with that
Had you
tenant.
had a disagreement with them? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, not up
Okay,
until
I'm
that
just going
point.
to ask them. What's going on?
What happened was there was a lot of micromanaging.
Okay.
We did have a tenant who was in arrears.
Okay.
And we would, seek approval to hire an attorney to do an eviction. And we'd get an okay, but then maybe his wife, Corinne, would go and talk to the tenant herself and change the whole situation. So there was so much micromanaging going on with the tenants that our word to the tenants didn't mean anything anymore.
Okay. So you decided you didn't want to do business with them anymore.
No.
All right.
You know what? It was a waste of our time, but it was a waste of their time as well.
Oh, it was
and
their
their
money, too. How much are
Yeah.
you getting paid to manage this two-family home?
We get paid 10% of the rent and a $20 bookkeeping fee.
Okay, and how much was the rent?
Maybe $450. I don't know that.
Okay. So you're getting paid about $100 a month?
Yeah, 90 plus 20, 110.
So why is it bad to micromanage people? What do you think?
I feel like if you're trying to micromanage someone, it's not going to be productive. The person's not going to do everything that you want them to do. They're not going to feel comfortable, and it's not going to work out.
That was just so well said. I think that's going to do it. We're going inside the courtroom.
All right, so now you are suing them for $219 for a water bill penalty. Tell me about that.
After their contract was up and we hired a new property manager, late in September, we received a notice of foreclosure from the city. And apparently the water bill had never been taken out of the previous property owner's name and put into our name.
Okay, and that was something you had expected them to do?
Sure.
Okay, and why hadn't that been done?
It was done, actually.
Okay.
However, it's up to the people at the different agencies to physically go in and change the work, and evidently it didn't get done. And we did apologize for that.
Wouldn't the water bill come either quarterly or monthly, however it works in your...
Yes,
Didn't you notice it wasn't coming?
we didn't,
Okay.
and that was unfortunate.
Okay, you're also suing for $2,500 for apartment damages. Tell me about that.
Well, after they terminated our contract and left us with the upper tenant, who they said would have their rent paid by a social service agency, they kind of went dark with the communication. I have an email from the 3rd of August where I'm asking, has the upper tenant paid yet? And the short response, no. I wanted to ask them to please stop by the apartment, check it
Because
out.
they're still working for you in August?
Yeah, up
It's
until
to
August 30th.
August 30th, right.
But I don't think they ever did that, because when we were finally able to get in around the first week of September, tenant was gone, apartment was destroyed.
Okay, but so may I see the pictures of $2,500 worth of damages?
I don't have pictures, I only have the receipts from the new property management.
Why don't you have pictures?
I do not have them.
Okay. Now, they have to pay the damage by those folks, and the reason for that is what?
When you have a tenant, non-payment of rent,
Are we talking about non-payment of rent or apartment damages? I hadn't gotten to non-payment of rent, but is it the same unit?
it's the same unit for
Okay.
the tenant that was supposedly having the rent paid for the
Right.
month of
Those
July.
people hadn't paid since when? Well, how much is their rent?
The rent for that apartment was $400 a month.
Okay, but you're suing for $2,400.
Right, because of July, August, the damages and lost
No,
rent.
the damages are $2,500
Right.
other that you're suing for. Let's take them separately. You're suing for $2,500 worth of damage, but you cannot prove to me $1 worth of damage. You haven't brought me one picture. You haven't brought me one receipt to show that there was $2,500
I have
worth
the
of damage.
receipts.
The only thing you have is a line entry by your new property manager. Then you're also, aside from that $2,500, suing for $2,400 for loss of rent from July, okay, all the way to December, 5 months after they're not working for you anymore. Why would they pay rent for your tenant?
For the first month, they had the notice from the social services agency. For the second month, they were in non-payment of rent.
And what? Why does that obligate? Why isn't that just tough for you? Because you're the landlord, and that sometimes happens. Tenants sometimes don't pay rent, and then you got to go through the unpleasantness of evicting them or giving them a 3-day notice, which apparently then your wife pulls away out of pity or whatever. Why is that not just your issue? Why would they have to reach into their pockets when you're paying them $45 per unit and hand you $2,400 because a tenant supposedly damaged your place and $2,500 because they didn't pay rent? Why would they have to do that?
Well, their contract states that they would utilize all professional and efficient methods to screen their tenants, and I don't think that that was a very good job.
You're a whiner. This is really your problem. It's not their problem. They're property managers. I can see why it is that they didn't want to continue to do business with you. You have to understand what the role of a property manager is. Accounts receivable, accounts payable. You guys screwed up on the water bill. You're paying the entire penalty. You should have noticed there was no water bill coming. You didn't. Fine, it happens, mistakes are made. The cost of that mistake is not $5,000 like he's saying, but $219. As for the apartment damages and the loss of rent, that is not a property manager's duty, all right? $219, verdict for the plaintiff.
Hold on right there.
Okay, what you got to understand is there are two elements to a lawsuit, proving liability and damages. Even if you prove liability, without proof of how much you lose, you walk out with a big fat zero.